Paul was in prison. It appears that this was not the imprisonment of which we read at the end of the book of Acts. There, Paul was living in a rented house, and there was a soldier by his side, and he was waiting for judgment from Rome. And it was during that imprisonment that he penned the books of Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon that we call the prison letters or the prison epistles. But the evidence seems to suggest that Paul was released from that first imprisonment and that he ministered and even wrote a little bit over the next couple of years before he was arrested and imprisoned in Rome a second time. And this time he was not in a rented house. He was cold. He was lonely. He wrote to Timothy. We call it the book of 2 Timothy. And in that book, he instructed Timothy about certain things. And he urged Timothy to come to him and more. In the book of 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 16 through 18, Paul wrote to Timothy about a particular individual. And it's interesting to me that by inspiration we have record of this person. 2 Timothy chapter 1, beginning with verse 16, Paul wrote, "The Lord grant mercy to the household of Onesiphorus, for he often refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chain. But when he arrived in Rome, he sought me out very zealously and found me. The Lord grant to him that he may find mercy from the Lord in that day. And you know very well how many ways he ministered to me at Ephesus." This man, Onesiphorus, apparently from Ephesus, or at least was connected to Ephesus, where Timothy had been working. But Onesiphorus was a help to Paul. He comforted Paul. In fact, Paul said, he often refreshed me. That word, refreshed, would describe perhaps cooling feet in water. They walked everywhere, and in those days that would be a very refreshing thing. And that's the sort of thing that this word would bring to mind. Not that that's what he did for Paul, but it would bring about that same refreshing feeling. It had to do with reviving and encouraging someone, or giving someone space and fresh air so they can breathe. Onesiphorus gave relief to Paul, and that was a breath of fresh air. And really, we need to be like Onesiphorus. So how do we do that? How can we do what he did? 3 things. Number 1, look for people who are in need. Paul said that Onesiphorus zealously sought him out in Rome. Now remember, Paul was a prisoner in Rome, and Onesiphorus was zealously putting effort in to finding Paul so that he could help him. Perhaps we think about Galatians 6 and verse 10. There the Apostle Paul writing had said, "As we therefore have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith." Every day, you and I see people around us who are in need, and we have opportunity because they're there every day. Let's look for them. Let's find those people who need help and show them the love of Jesus. That's how we can be like Onesiphorus. Number 1, look for people who are in need. And number 2, do not be ashamed of those who are in need. Onesiphorus was not ashamed of Paul's chains. At a time in which others had turned away from Paul because, well, the heat had been turned up so high by Rome, when so many had gone away from Paul, Onesiphorus looked for him to help him. He was not ashamed of Paul the prisoner. You know, we could keep that in mind when it comes to the help that we provide for other people. James chapter 2 reminds us that we should not show partiality. A poor person in rags should be just as welcome as a wealthy person in the finest clothes with us because we're the Lord's people. We could look back to the book of Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 5, and there we are reminded of this. He who mocks the poor reproaches his maker. He who is glad at calamity will not go unpunished. Don't be ashamed of those who are in need. They need our help. Let's help them. And then number 3, refresh those who are in need. Onesiphorus was like a breath of fresh air for Paul. We can do the same thing for the people around us. How do we do it? We might think about Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. There the prophet reminded the people of God what they needed to do. He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? We do that. We refresh people who are around us. When we do justly and love mercy and we walk with God, the people around us will be revived and refreshed through us. Friends, there are people that you and I see every day. You're going to see them, if not today, then this week, people who need to see Jesus in you. Be like Onesiphorus and refresh the people who are around you. Thank you for watching this devotional. We invite you to come and worship with us anytime that you are in Albuquerque. You will find a group of people who love Jesus, who are trying to live for Him, and who are glad that you stopped in to worship with us.